So excited to have you here. We're excited to have Kim back. We're at full strength. Albert in the house as well. Do they still say that, Albert, in the house? Or is that, did that go out with Arsenio? Don't they
I
say
think it
it?
might have went out, but I think it's cool to bring it back, Mark. So maybe
Okay.
we can bring it
Albert,
back.
thank you.
Okay. Albert's in the house. Kim's here.
Kim, how are you?
And I want a big Mark Thompson Show welcome for a guy who is the sexiest political analyst on the planet, John Rothmann, everybody. Come on. He's a lecturer.
Maybe we could just raise the roof for John if we're going to throw back.
Oh, as long as we're bringing back
older,
stuff, yes. Let's raise the
roof
roof.
for John Rothmann.
Smash the like button for John Rothmann.
It with your iron rod.
So, John, it is great to have you in our mix always.
My pleasure.
I want to ask you first about this Dianne Feinstein announcement. As I was saying before, not unexpected. I thought it's awkward, to say the least, that she is saying, I didn't know anything about this. I mean, it really speaks to what, I'm sorry, John, is just not the Dianne Feinstein that you knew before. Let's be honest.
That's correct. And I made the observation yesterday on another network where I asked to comment that it was a confusing announcement. You know, she stood up in the caucus and announced she wasn't running. The staff put out the statement, and then she evidently didn't realize it had been put out or was confused about it. But she did announce she's going to continue to serve until her term is over. And so the race for her seat will intensify.
You know, this is an interesting point that Vilma's making. If a senator has lost cognitive abilities, he or she should have to step down. He or she is not representing their constituents. The problem with that, I think, John, I'm wondering if you agree with me, is that it's hard to prove, quote, prove, or in other way, demonstrate, might be another word, that someone's cognitive abilities have reached some threshold by which they are no longer able to serve their constituents.
Yeah, look, there is no provision. I always remember another California senator. His name was Claire Engel. He was elected in 1958, overwhelmingly. And in 1963, he had a massive stroke. He continued to serve. And in 1964, when the Civil Rights Bill came up before the United States Senate, Claire Engel was wheeled in to the Senate chamber. He couldn't speak. So when the time came for him to vote, he went like this. He pointed to
Wow.
and it was counted. Now, he died shortly thereafter and was succeeded by Pierre Salinger, who was appointed by Pat Brown and who was defeated in the election of 1964 by George Murphy.
But
That's a great story. But
doesn't
go
that
ahead.
pointing to the eyes show that he had the cognitive ability to make the connection, that there was something there that he could still think and vote?
He may have, he may not have. I couldn't tell you. But the point was, there's no way to remove a sitting senator unless that senator resigns or dies or is expelled. And we had examples of that during the Civil War when members of the Senate were expelled. Very unusual, very unlikely to happen. Dianne Feinstein has a very capable staff, as Mark pointed out. They have really been responsive on the district level, that is her district offices here in California. And I expect she'll serve her term and is now going to be applauded by one and all for a stellar record. Remember, this is a person who has served almost a third of a century in the United States Senate. The woman who was defeated when she ran for governor of California, was twice defeated when she ran for mayor of San Francisco, came back from everything in order to become a successful mayor, succeeding when George Moscone was assassinated, and who has served 10 years in the United States as mayor of San Francisco, and almost 32 years it'll be when she retires as a United States senator. And you judge her not by the end, but I think by her full record.
A quick question for two dudes, you two. Does it seem at all like Dianne Feinstein is being called out for her age and maybe her memory as well, when you've got other senators in the past, all male, who have been older than her, who may have been more questionably suited than Dianne Feinstein? Is this like you're old and you're a woman? What about Robert Byrd? He's 92, right? What about Chuck Grassley? Daniel Inouye was pretty old. He was 88. almost 89 when he was. So I guess my question is, do you feel like there's some type of sexism involved?
No,
here?
I don't. I think all of the ones you've mentioned were sharp until the very end. Dianne Feinstein has not held a press conference nor spoken publicly in at least a year. So I can only say her ability to function is legitimately questioned. It has nothing to do with the fact that she's a woman. If her mind were clear and she could do public appearances, she would have retired in a very different way.
I second what Brother Rothman has just said, and I would also mention that she is a senior senator. I mean, she's someone who has roles as leadership within the Senate. So the demands on her are not those of a junior senator. They're those of a senior senator, and it's time to push away. But she clearly is pushing away. The one thing I would say, and I want to move on, John, but I would ask you this one thing that relates to Dianne Feinstein before we move on. It's the decision to serve out the term. Can you help us understand the calculus that goes into that decision? I mean, if she is as diminished as we know she really is, why not push away now, let Newsom appoint? What is the strategy or the thinking that goes into making that part of the decision?
Hey, first of all, I talked with one of her closest aides last week, and I asked him, he had just spoken to her. He said, John, she's fully able to perform her functions, but she's clearly diminished. That was his comment to me. But there was no suggestion that she was in any way mentally incapacitated. I think she has short-term memory problems. But okay, at least that's what I was told by an anonymous source, but somebody who knows. She, I think, is determined to hang on. I've known a lot of people who are older who simply don't want to give up. But let me point out to you, you pointed out the seniority. Her seniority in the United States Senate, the benefit for California is quite remarkable. And there will now be a robust campaign. I would give the edge to Adam Schiff, who has now been endorsed by Nancy Pelosi, who has $20 million in the bank. Katie Porter, I don't think will raise that kind of money nor have that kind of influence. And Barbara Lee, I don't see as a formidable contender. So I expect Adam Schiff to win the nomination and to be elected to the United States Senate. Remember, in California, you don't have a race between a Republican and a Democrat. You have a race between the two top vote getters. So it could well be Adam Schiff and one of the others that I've mentioned.
Yeah, it's certainly the case that Adam Schiff will likely be the, I'm going to say, institutional choice. He'll have, I think, a lot of the Democratic Party and party money behind him. I think Katie Porter might really be something of a more, I don't want to say more populist, but, she has a populist image, John, and she might actually be able to put together a sizable coalition as well.
She was barely reelected. I don't think.
Well, she's barely reelected in a red county.
Barely reelected. I point that out. Look,
Okay.
If I were Katie Porter and I realized that I might not win in 2 years running for the United States Senate makes a lot of sense.
Okay. All right. Well, that's the political calculus. There you go from John Rothman. John, now I want to move on to where we are with China. These balloons and general disposition toward China, it's an odd relationship we have, right, John? We're their best customer. They're a critical part of our supply chain. We have an economic relationship with them that's sort of like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and yet we are on what you could say is real, increasingly hostile, tense footing with them.
We have real tensions. Remember what's going on the South China Sea. China is building islands. Essentially, they're still threatening to take Taiwan, and they're talking about an invasion of Taiwan. So you're right, but that is the balance which needs to be struck. I listened this morning to Nikki Haley's announcement as a candidate for president of the United States, and she leveled a firm blast at China. Well, my answer is really, we have to live in a world with China. I always remember my old boss, Richard Nixon, and the term he used, détente, in relation to the Soviet Union, which was certainly at the height of its power during the Nixon years. We have a détente with China. That is to say, we're going to disagree on foreign policy. We're going to compete in the world. But when it comes to trade, we're there. And let me just point out to you, nobody envisioned when Nixon went to China that China would become the supplier that we depended on. We thought we were opening up the Chinese market and we would make a fortune by selling to the Chinese. And it turned out the other way, and there's a good reason for it. Their costs in terms of production of goods and services is much cheaper. They don't have a labor union in China. So the whole question of our infrastructure, the one thing I can tell you that Joe Biden said that resonated with me is we have to be less dependent. And I think that is something which will cost us more money, because it does cost more to produce products in the United States.
Well, this is something that gets to a general philosophy that I really subscribe to, and that is there are a lot of things about life and our culture that may be, and the society, when I say life, that may be more expensive. To live sustainably is more expensive. It's cheaper just to throw crap away, make it out of plastic, and just fill up landfills. But then eventually you choke yourself off, your world is toxified, and everybody dies. So it's more expensive. Bless you, John Rothmann.
It's nothing to sneeze at, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Well done. That's why he's a professional. Go ahead. Yes.
Let me just indicate to you, the American people are going to spend more money, have greater expenses in the days ahead. There's no question about it. We are going to have real competition with China. We're going to have to deal with that as well. Question of whether they spied on us, the answer is, of course they did. We spy on them. The fact is that they used a balloon. Thank God Joe Biden had the good sense not to shoot it down when it was over Montana. He waited till it was out at sea. We've recovered most of it. The damage to American security evidently was minimal, because certain blocking devices were used in order to prevent that balloon from sending messages. But the extreme statements by many Republicans denouncing Joe Biden, saying, oh, we would have shot it down immediately, then they wouldn't have followed the advice of the American military. The American military was very, very clear about the fact that we should not shoot it down over the continental United States. And in fact, the fact that it went down at sea made its recovery, more likely. Now, the other balloons or whatever objects they are that have been out there, no one has yet implied or proved that they were of Chinese origin or that they were spy materials. So I was very interested, by the way, when Mitt Romney came out of the hearing and he said the military did the right thing. And you will note that the Republicans, when they came out of their briefing, all 100 members of the United States Senate were briefed. They were no longer blasting the fact that the balloon was not shot down, because then they would have had to attack America's military. And I don't think the Republicans are up for that right now.
Right. And that's the politics of it. It's a fact that we pay attention to this balloon thing. And I'm not saying it's not a big deal, but we pay attention to it because we can see it. And apparently there were 3 of these things during the Trump administration. They were never shot down. They just floated through,
which Trump claims he had no knowledge of. And several of his key advisors, including Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, who plans to run for president, said he didn't have any knowledge of it. So, you're right. They're playing politics with it now. If I may, though, I'm less concerned about the Chinese situation than I am about what's happening in Ukraine right now. We have a major crisis taking place. Spring is coming. The Russians are going to mount a huge offensive. There's no question that they are going to use missiles and high technology, that they are determined to win this thing. Putin has put himself in that position. There is a lot of speculation in Eastern Europe that the Russians, if they succeed, will next take aim at Poland. And that's why President Biden is going to Poland, his second trip to Poland this year. We better keep our eyes on where the real danger is. We face an economic danger from China. At this point, not a military one, but from Russia, there is a potential military danger which needs to be addressed. And remember, we walk a delicate tightrope, because the last thing we want is a nuclear confrontation. And let me point out that the former president of Russia, one of Putin's closest advisors, Mr. Medvedev, says that nuclear exchanges are possible. And that scares the living bejeebers out of me.
Of course. I mean, this is the thing that I think is so very, very dangerous and just moves this to another level. But when you talk about Poland, you are pretty much then forced into a military conflict. Right now, it's a proxy war, I think you'd concede.
It is very much like the Spanish Civil War in 1930s, which pitted 2 powers against each other. This is a proxy war from our point of view, not from the Russians' point of view. The Russians are engaged directly, but we, and when I say we, I don't just mean the United States, I mean NATO as well, are deeply engaged. And this is a very, my friends in Europe are scared because they don't see an outcome which is positive in any way.
Well, the other thing that is scary is the announcement from the U.S. saying, and other NATO countries saying, get out of Russia. They're saying, everybody who's an American, get out of Russia now. That clarion call, I think, does reflect another level of conflict, sort of what you're talking about, where on the 1-year anniversary of this entire thing, we end up in an escalation period, probably. That could be very, very scary.
Yeah, and that's the point. So Russia and China are the two major foreign policy tasks, and there is a third element, and that is that if you've been following the United Nations reports, Iran is developing a nuclear weapon, and they are on the verge of having the ability to, well, have one. And so the question becomes, what are we, that is collectively, going to do about that? So whoever the next president of the United States is, whether it's Joe Biden or someone else, foreign policy is going to be at the top of the list. I'm not going to get into the question, although you mentioned, I think when we talked about Dianne Feinstein, or maybe we didn't, but we should have, this question about the continued gun violence in this country. And it was very interesting for me after this tragedy in Michigan, that again, there were calls for some sort of gun control. And again, the Republicans dismissed it out of hand. And given the deadlock in the Congress, with the House controlled by the Republicans and the Democrats controlling the Senate, nothing is going to happen. And let me indicate, we have another big story that I think is going to emerge this week. We were told before Friday, and that comes out of Georgia. And that is that the attorney general there, the district attorney rather there, is going to they're not filing charges. I want to be very clear about this. What they're doing is they're issuing the first part and the end conclusions of their report without the middle, which we are told may lead to ultimately an indictment on a state level of Donald Trump. And I'm going to watch very carefully in the next several days as that portions of the report, the beginning and the end, are released to see what the general thrust is. So I think people have to be alert to that. I was asked this morning by another commentator who spoke with me about what I thought of Nikki Haley's candidacy. She is not formidable, but she's running for vice president. That's what she's really running for. The Republicans will have to put a woman on the ticket if the nominee is a man. And Nikki Haley makes the most sense. Two-term governor of South Carolina, 2 years as ambassador to the United Nations, and she is to the right of the Republican Party. She has a real problem because she has to be able to negotiate or navigate the Trump waters, and that's going to be a very, very tough thing for her to do. Remember, this is the only cabinet officer in the Trump administration who left voluntarily, who was not fired, and about whom Trump has had nothing negative to say. So that's also going to be an interesting dimension.
Didn't Barr resign? I thought he resigned also.
Yes,
Am I wrong about that?
But I'm talking about someone who resigned without any controversy.
Without controversy, okay.
Well,
that really narrows the field in the case of the Trump crew.
Clarifying that for me. Now you know why it's the Mark Thompson program.
No, but I agree with you about Nikki Haley. We did a big thing about her yesterday. We ran a little bit of her campaign spot, and what you can really get sucked into this. Indian descent. She's a woman. She really plays that. Look. Just as I've said about so many who are sort of the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of Republicans, Liz Cheney's of the world. I get it. Great that they're speaking out against Trump. Great that Nikki Haley pushed away from the table. She's against a woman's right to choose. She got an A+ rating from the NRA. Do not be in any way deceived. She is not a soft GOP candidate. She is hard right.
Hard right, no question about it. But all of the potential candidates, with the exception of Liz Cheney, although on issues she is hard right. Let's be very clear about that. The Republican Party doesn't have a middle. I always like to cite the example, being a liberal Republican is a little bit like being a high church Unitarian. It's possible, but pointless. And I think that's where the Republican Party is today.
Smash the like button for our brother.
Smash it
Yeah.
with your iron rod.
He is a sexy fool. I want to see, is there anything I want to get to John Rothman here before he says goodbye, Albert? Is there anything?
Wait, before you say goodbye,
yes, sir.
I have to say a word to Kim McAllister. I'm glad she's back from vacation. Her son is about to celebrate his birthday, and I want you to wish him a very happy birthday.
Thank you. I'll do that. Thank you.
Just wanted to throw that in.
Does your son, is your son aware of John Rothman? I mean, will that mean anything to him?
Yes, John Rothman plays a big role in the lives of my children.
I see. Do you
all
want to expand on that? Or is,
they're all huge fans. He's every time I would bring them into Station X, he would be incredibly kind to them. Actually hosted my daughter on the air and let her take some phone calls one time with as a talk show
so
host.
that really is yes.
And that's when the ratings went through the roof. I want you to know.
That's what happened. So he's
maybe they should have left the kids on the air. That would have been who knows.
Thank you.
Some would suggest that was what KGO did. They left us kids on the air.
Yes, they did. Well, this is look at this. This is from Virage. John Rothman is brilliant in his analysis. Wow. I don't know if I'd say brilliant. I mean, I think he's good.
Why don't you, my wife, when you say that, she may not let me participate again.
I mean, he's okay. I like to get him on, but I don't know, brilliant. Oh, geez.
So we have a lot to watch this week, and I
yes,
really
we do, John.
Keep your eye on Georgia. Keep your eye on. Oh, I didn't mention Mike Pence. May I just quickly? Do I have?
Well, he's pushing back on that subpoena, isn't he, John?
Let me just say. You're either a member of the executive branch or you're not. The vice president may be president of the Senate. He is not or she is not a member of the legislative branch. Take a look at the Constitution and you'll see that the free speech clause relates to senators and representatives. It does not relate to vice presidents who preside over the Senate but are not members of the Senate. And I point that out. He's definitely going to lose that battle and will then be compelled, I believe, to testify. So that's another very interesting thing. And as we talk about potential candidates for president, we can't leave Mike Pence out. He may not be registering in high numbers. Actually, he's in single digits. But he is going to run, and he is going to base his campaign in large measure on the evangelicals of America. He's very popular, and he intends to score big on that. You may know that Mike Pence just came out in favor of abandoning even the abortion pill, as it's called. This is a guy who is going to face a lot of heat, and I'm sure he's going to get it from Donald Trump. I'm waiting to see what Trump has to say about Nikki Haley. He blasts everyone. So far, he hasn't blasted her. Be interesting to see what nickname he comes up with. But anyway, I had to throw those things in. Mark, I hope you don't mind taking advantage of splendid generosity and allowing me to be here.
I love that you're on. The audience loves you. In truth, I'm just exploiting you for my own gain, which I like doing weekly. Love hearing from John Rothman, says Ren, and everybody loves your take. So, John, thank you. Let's talk next week, and really all the best, my friend. Love seeing you.
Pleasure. Okay. And Kim, have a wonderful birthday celebration.
Wow.
I
want to hear all about it.
Thanks, John Rothman, everybody. Come on. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.